You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today, we wind up our season. We're on hiatus until the fall, so be sure and look for us then. And we wind up with a real bang, too. A book entitled Planet Patriarchy, with the subtitle, Global Tales of Feminism and Oppression. It's been assembled and edited by Beatrix Campbell and Rahila Gupta. Campbell is an OBE, that's for Order of the British Empire. Campbell is also a writer, broadcaster, playwright, and feminist activist who has been awarded several honorary degrees and doctorates. She was involved in the equal pay strike at Time Out magazine and in the founding of the cooperatively owned City Limits magazine. She was a member of the Women's National Commission until its abolition by the coalition government in 2010. Her path-breaking Vegan Peer Revisited won the Cheltenham Festival Prize. Rahila Gupta is a freelance journalist, author, and activist, currently chair of Southall Black Sisters, which advocates and campaigns for Black and global women escaping violence in the UK. She has written for The Guardian, New Humanist, New Internationalists, and Open Democracy, among others. Her books include From Homemakers to Jailbreakers, Enslaved, Provoked, and Don't Wake Me. These two remarkable women have assembled an anthology of 8 very different countries, which they examine in depth with a very feminist analysis. No one has been quite crazy enough to attempt this since I commissioned and edited Sisterhood is Global, the international women's movement anthology, covering 80 countries in 1984. I welcome this book and these two crazy, wonderful, courageous women. In fact, I will return with both of them to discuss this special book after this brief pause. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Beatrix and Rahila, may I call you that?
Yes, of course.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. Very glad to have you here and with us.
Thank you very much for having us on. We're honored.
We are.
Oh, well, I was just saying before we went on live that only you two have been crazy enough to try the same thing that I tried in 1984, which is, when Sisterhood is Global, and when we take on these global feminism, it's quite a thing, and I congratulate you on your amazing attempt and your accomplishment.
Thank you.
I really know what it entails, God, yes. So let's start in. Many possible places to start. Well, I mean, for one thing, you have done 8 countries, or 7 or 8 countries, in depth, whereas I did 80 more, superficially. So yours is very impressive. And how did this book start? How did it come into being?
Okay, I think I'll start on this question because it was I who proposed to be. This is Rahila speaking. And what happened was, having been a feminist activist all my life, I was always sort of intrigued by the fact that all our successes seemed somewhat hollow, and that patriarchy had a way of bouncing back and of diminishing whatever successes we had. And I couldn't quite work it out. I wanted to understand that whole system a bit better. And the other thing was that having, been very active in anti-racist movements, it was such a different form of oppression, because racism was something that was out there. It was something that could be easily identified. Whereas patriarchy was at once the most public of institutions and the most private of institutions, the place where we were supposed to be loved by our fathers and our brothers and our sons, and then in modern times by, in terms of romantic love, by our spouses. And yet it was the ground of, the institution's most terrifying intimacies. So it felt like a paradox that needed to be teased out. And the immediate trigger, I suppose, for this book is that I went to listen to Bea talk about her last, I think it was your second last book. Is that right, Bea? In which you talk about, she raised some fascinating questions about neo-patriarchy and neo-capitalism. It was the 30th anniversary of the women's liberation movement. I came away kind of buzzing from her talk and thinking there's something else that we need to do here. We need to pin down what is it about patriarchy that makes it so resilient and so needed by all the political systems that we have ever had the fortune or misfortune to live under. So whether it is a theocracy or a monarchy or a communist society or a democracy, all of
There it
these.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I put the question to Bea, and I said, Bea, how about it?
And of course I said yes.
Well, you didn't actually, because you said,
not?
well, initially, because it's so daunting, just like Robin said, it's such a daunting project. We were both daunted by the enormity of it.
Of course.
But we finally, you can talk about Bea, how you came round to it, perhaps. But yes, you wanted to do it, but it was just,
let me be honest, I wanted to do it because it is, I think, one of the great questions of our time. But I also wanted to do it with you because this is Bea speaking. We had known each other for quite a while. We weren't in the same universes. I'm English, I'm white, but was very familiar with Rahila's activism and in particular her engagement with a wonderful organisation called Southall Black Sisters.
Yes, of course.
It felt absolutely right that we, at this point in time, should be combining our respective histories of racism, privilege. Neither of us are privileged, but I'm white and therefore I have that privilege.
Right.
And of course, the history of colonialism, which is it's decisive in the history of England, I'm English, and India, which is where Rahila hails from. So it felt like a lovely collaboration. We were thwarted in all sorts of ways, which it's not important now to go into particularly. But I think what we ended up with was thinking that what we'd actually like to do is to delve into societies that seem to be significant, would tell us a story about the themes that we were interested in, but we didn't necessarily know. We weren't going to write about England because we know England very well. You, Rahila, resisted writing about India because you know that very well. We resisted writing about the United States because we all know the United States very well. So we delved into societies that seemed to be indicative of our time. And that's what determined the choices that we made. Not least, actually, one of the most important was the great feminist experiment in Rojava, which Rahila can speak about, which was then and is now a unique experiment in governance, in egalitarianism, in one of the most, you would think, inhospitable
Mm-hmm.
parts of the planet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rahila, tell us.
Yeah, before I come to that, actually, I just wanted to say that the United States, though, permeates all of our countries through their aggressive foreign policy. And, you know, I discovered to my horror the kinds of societies, well, I knew some of it, but I didn't know the detail of it, the kinds of societies it has promoted, encouraged, etc., which, you know, have the worst records on women's rights, on equality, on human rights, and so on. So I think we could not escape the U.S.
No, of course not. But you've done this very well. You've done El Salvador, you have done Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, South Africa, and Iceland, and then Rojava. And you know, it's remarkable how you covered this, because you have theocracies, you have communist societies, you have socialist societies, you have democratic socialist society. You know, you've really you've done an amazing job, and I recommend that this is the companion volume. A little more depressed because it's a year later and we're still not there, than to Sisterhood is Global. And it's quite extraordinary. I think I'll start. Well, I could start with I could start with Saudi Arabia and just plunge us in, but no. Why don't we start at the top of our list, and look at, I never remember how to pronounce his name, the Kurdish leader, male, who heads this women's movement. Is it Öcalan?
Öcalan.
Öcalan.
Abdullah Öcalan. Yes.
Right. Öcalan. Because some time ago, I was also an editor of Ms. Magazine, and some time ago I commissioned a piece about Kurdish women, because it did seem really, as you have said, unusual what they were doing. And they were organizing separately, and they were fighting forces, and they were doing extraordinary things. And I thought, yeah, but there's a man heading it. And we know where that leads. We've seen all these, quote, good men who are so sympathetic and then turn at the last minute. We've seen it forever. We've seen it in Algeria. We've seen it, as you point out, we're world weary feminists who say, oh yeah, that's another boy. But there was something different about the extent to which he was taking it. And you have hit that tightrope very carefully. So talk about Rojava.
Yes, I mean, I was very aware of the fact that there is a real suspicion, and justifiably so, amongst feminists about men playing a leading role in any feminist movement.
I'm grateful for the awareness, by the way, because many people aren't. And they say, "Oh, well, you're just being, carp."
No, absolutely. But this is exactly why I was so careful in the way I traced it, because two things I would say. One is that I think no freedom fighter anywhere in the world has ever theoretically placed women as the vanguard of that revolution. So in terms of his theoretical position, he says that women were the first to be enslaved in society, in the world, and therefore all other slaveries of, whether it was the transatlantic trade in black men and women,
right?
All other slaveries became easy to accept almost, because there was already this form of slavery. Yeah. So that was one part. That was his theorizing. And remember, he's been in prison. He's been in prison since 1999. Yeah. So the ideas were put into practice by women. And the women had to fight the men in their movement, because not all men were on board with Abdullah Öcalan's. And remember also that they were politics that had developed, because initially he was your classic Marxist-Leninist.
That's right.
And who believed in national, determination and in nationhood, and then came to the view that actually nations are patriarchal, they are capitalist, they actually they're violent. There is the thing to aim for is a form of self-administration, and it's a mixture of ideas which are anarchist in origin, plus Murray Bookchin, who was an American anarchist. His ideas were also taken on board and implemented in terms of this truly kind of local grassroots democracy that was a representative, not a representative, a participatory form of democracy. So that was the reason why I would say that he acts as a kind of a figurehead. And for years, it was solitary confinement, which meant that not even his lawyers could see him, not even his family could see him. So it wasn't like he could influence. There was not that kind of male influence. And the women have been amazingly strong, resilient, determined, visionary, and put this amazing society in place. So it has been a very positive development. I can talk a little bit more about the details of the society, but I have to say that we are on the cusp of it possibly disappearing.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah, and US is partly to blame for that.
Of course. Well, these days, pick a subject, and the U.S. is to blame for it. I mean, because we've been extraordinarily ahead of the rest of the world and just fucking up the whole world. Oh God. Anyway, it's a frightening thing. But I suspected at least that you were onto something different when in the title of the book, because patriarchy is used, and examinations of the global women's movement, which look at it in depth of any sort, tend not to do that. They tend to say it's Marxist, or it's that it's not. It's something else. It's socialist feminist. It's radical feminist. But they don't want to deal with patriarchy and a system of sexism mostly. And when I saw patriarchy and global patriarchy in your title, I thought, this is very interesting. This is interesting now. So I see that. I also think that it doesn't seem to be ready to last much longer, because Syria is carving up. I mean, that whole area, that whole region is in such flux and such violence and terror that I cannot see these small groups of women who have set up autonomous or nearly autonomous living situations to teach and heal and learn and build going further. I am very worried.
Yeah, and at the moment, what we've got there is a kind of a standoff. So Ahmed al-Shara, whose origins are Islamist, background in Al-Qaeda and ISIS, is now being feted by the West, because he's allowed the West to enter Syria and to invest, and therefore it's a land of gold now,
there goes that.
as far as the West is concerned. And UK too is complicit in that, because they were responsible for turning him from a jihadi into a suited, booted, respectable, presentable man. And he has so there's the standoff is that they've appointed a governor, and it's not a presidency, because that was one of the key factors in the Rojava revolution, that a man and a woman would be in charge of every single institution, right down from the local commune right up to the army. And the defense forces, in fact, is where the crunch point is now, has now come to that, because what they're being allowed to do within that area that they were self-administering is to keep on with those institutions that they had, with the sort of equal representation by men and women, apart from the governor of the whole area, who has been appointed by Ahmed al-Shara, but he comes from the Kurdish revolutionary movement. So that's kind of going on in the background. Where the sticking point is that the YPJ, the Women's Defense Forces, are not being allowed to join the Syrian National Forces, whereas and they feel, and it's not a militant force in the sense that it's a defensive force, and the women have felt that their presence in the defense forces has actually made a huge difference to their status and position at home within society at large. So it's quite important for them to be part of the national armed forces. But of course, no women are to be seen anywhere in al-Shara's administration. So it's very hard to know where it's going.
Yeah, we're back where we started. Yeah, well, let's look at possibly the next best thing, which is Iceland, which is a democratic, socialist sort of country, and seems to be most open to, well, because it's a matter of running for office. Seems to be most open to feminist representation, and yet isn't.
Well, and yet. I mean, the funny thing is about Iceland is that for really since the 1970s, but certainly since the 1980s, when we would argue the hegemony of neoliberalism across the world really ignited, it created the conditions in which every single year thereafter, since the beginning of the 1980s, inequalities globally have increased. Now, the paradox about Iceland is that it's never really been a social democratic society, unlike its neighbours in the rest of Scandinavia, which have been more or less consistently since the Second World War social democratic, and therefore more amenable to the impact of feminism. Paradox is this, that it's been governed by neoliberal parties for an awful lot of its life.
Yeah.
But the great thing is it has a very vigorous civil society, and the most important thing of all, 90%, it's worth repeating, 90% of Icelandic workers belong to trade unions.
Yeah.
And trade unions are a really significant part of the infrastructure of governance. And it was the relationship between the trade union movement, or the trade union movement as a resource, and the emergence of feminism in the 1970s that enabled that extraordinary moment in 1975 when 90% of women in Iceland decided to go on strike.
Yeah.
And we've been inspired by that moment ever since. And the clever thing about it was that they didn't particularly utilize the most feminist demands that you could imagine. What they did was to consult their own experience and their own constituency, women of all sorts of different classes and political orientations, to work out what it was that was the most important thing that they could say. And what they were able to say was, society doesn't function without us. Whatever our age, whatever kind of work we do, society stops if we stop.
Yeah.
And they stop.
We are not only the makers of production, as Engels and Marx would have said, but we are the makers of reproduction, which makes production possible. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is the key, I think, in a way, to many of the arguments that we make in the book, which is that it's the sphere of reproduction, the reproduction of everyday life.
Yes.
From potholes in the roads to how we get educated, to how we commune as a society. And Icelandic feminism has been very alive to this. And one of the things that has created is a feminist imperative, which sits alongside a contradictory element of Icelandic society. And it's this, that from the 1980s, feminist pressure on political institutions has been really remarkably resilient and successful. Their campaigns on parental leave, on domestic violence, on equal representation in the institutions, on the transparency of people's pay differentials, all of that stuff, it enjoys a kind of consensus, but it's up against something which has proved to be relatively impenetrable. And it's this, that in 1980, the government in Iceland became resolutely, determinedly, madly neoliberal. And it was that commitment to what they felt was a kind of Viking, insurgent market ideology that has produced some of the contradictions. For example, fishing, a community industry forever in Icelandic society, in which women participated with men, has become almost entirely privatized, run by 10 large corporations that dominate the fishing industry, run by men who, generally speaking, know each other. They're pals, they're relatives. And so this privatization imperative has produced an economy in Iceland that is undeniably, as one of the great scholars who's written about this, Margaret Wilson, has said, it's just thoroughly patriarchal. The whole project was thoroughly patriarchal. And this helps us understand something that I think in our book we tried to show, which is in all these different systems, where, well, in the end, actually, they're all systems that are now penetrated thoroughly by capitalism. They're all capitalist societies in one way or another. It's the sphere of reproduction, as you referred to moments ago. It's how societies manage the taking care of themselves. If this becomes deregulated, privatized, and corporate, then women are done in. And that has happened in China, in Russia. Tragically, it's happened in South Africa, where the deal in South Africa in 1994, which produced its beautiful egalitarian, perhaps the most egalitarian constitution ever, was undone by a pledge enforced by white corporate power in South Africa, that they would go with political democracy, sharing power with Black people, but what they would not tolerate was any penetration of white economic power. And that was the deal that was made. And consequently, instead of South Africa becoming what the Constitution promised, an egalitarian kind of social democratic society, it's a society that is thoroughly neoliberal. And of course, that means that the great townships that are home to millions of poor Black people have been relatively untouched.
They've just been left off of the edges.
Insurgent economic power.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Terrible.
And I just also wanted to add on the Iceland issue, B, that you talked about, and our book was actually published before the Epstein files became such a big scandal. But you talked about, in such a society with democratically accountable standards, you had these shadowy networks of men, who wielded real power. And from a feminist perspective, it is quite disheartening to think that, whatever our activism might lead to, changes in law, in policy, in implementation, whether it's, domestic violence and policing or whatever it might be, actually it is being undone by men who have, who just bypass the system.
It bounces right back to here. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Shadow
Iceland,
states, furtive states, secretive shadow states, which are not accountable to anyone, and which wield huge global economic power.
Yeah. Well, you certainly see it right now in the United States. It's breathtaking. It's just absolutely breathtaking because it's so blatant, and it's so, well, the hell with you. I don't care. And it's getting away with it so far. I mean, I think, she said.
Well, can I just say, I'm thoroughly patriarchal in their values.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. But I mean, but I tend to think, but I'm not at all certain of this. I want to think that the populace here in the States is beginning to wake up to the reality and beginning to turn, and the worm's turning, and but I don't know that I really believe that. And I think that the intrepidity of the other forces is quite remarkable, and it just doesn't seem to be.
One of the things that we learned in our research, as you'd expect, is that there is feminist resistance everywhere. It never dies.
Right.
However, what becomes really decisive is in what ways these thoroughly patriarchal regimes tolerate feminism, tolerate their creative, ingenious inventions in civil society. Anything from legal representation, various forms of creative, performative, funny, witty theatre, honesty, anything. Do they tolerate that presence in civil society to the extent that the society can be changed by where feminism has historically always made space? And I think the worrying thing for us now is that what we're reminded of is feminists never give up.
Well, that's true.
We're always there. We're always up to something. But these regimes are increasingly shut.
Yeah.
Shut.
And also, I wanted to come back to what you were saying, Robin, about, having some hope in the American populace about it waking up. I mean, I think
I haven't been very hopeful. I've been, in fact, rather despairing.
Yeah. I mean, my kind of, sorry, go ahead.
No, this is relatively newfound and very fragile because it just seems to be in the last few weeks almost that finally the public seems to be saying, okay, now just a minute, we've had it. But I don't know that. I don't trust it yet. I don't trust it.
Well, I was sort of going to come back with a more kind of bleaker assessment of the situation.
Okay, lay it on me.
And look at the whole arc, really, so as we were talking about the 1990s being a turning point, I do believe that the 21st century began with the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the collapse of the Soviet Union. So really what happened was that until that point, not only did the West want to establish its economic and military superiority over the Soviet Union, it wanted to promote its democratic values as the weapon that separated it from the communist world, and that this is what attracted populations. They were free in Western societies, they had equal rights, their human rights were respected, etc., etc. Once that communist threat disappeared, there was no need for the West to try and establish its moral authority against any other competing system, because there was none. And what has been replaced now by the ideological vacuum left by the absence of that sort of anti-capitalist position is a series of countries who are talking in terms of America first, Saudi first, India first, Russia first. And their identities are being crystallized around, so they're all capitalist societies, so they don't have that to differentiate themselves. They're crystallizing it around a nationalism that is based on religion, as in the case of India or Saudi Arabia, or even Russia with its Russian Orthodox Church, and therefore establishing its sort of place in the world as being something in opposition to the US. And establishing its authority. But all of those identities are reliant on a harking back to the past when women were in their place, when they were in the kitchen, when they were, not fighting for their rights. And so it's this. So I see Trump actually not as an aberration, but as a culmination of these developments. And my fear is that this kind of authoritarian populism, where democracy will be the door through which they enter, like in India, like in Turkey, so-called, I mean, they're manipulated democracies, of course. There's manipulation of the vote, etc., that we are entering an era. And I hope that the populace will wake up and, and maybe the kind of street actions we've seen in Bangladesh or in Nepal might become a feature of societies across the world. But of course, those have not necessarily gone anywhere good. But that kind of people's action, people's movements are the only things I think which is going to overturn this moment that we're in, which is capitalism cannot stand democracy. It cannot stand democratic controls. Democracy cuts its ability to grow, wild and unrestrained. And I think that's where we're at. This is the moment we're at. And I'm not saying it'll last forever, but I think it's going to get much worse.
But the planet won't last forever either. I mean,
exactly.
The clock is ticking on how long that will last.
I think that one of the things that we want to say about that is it sounds very crude, but it's a real challenge to a sort of fantasy about progress. What we're suggesting is that we are now living in a new era of male domination. It's not absolute. But it prevails.
Yes, it does. You're absolutely correct. I've been playing with the idea of putting most of my effort, or a great deal of our effort, into religion, particularly into trying to take that strand of the knots, and pull at it and pull and tug, so that at least that one lets up, because it's very difficult once they've got God on their side, and we're having acute problems with that, of course, in the States now, and so, but but you see, the problem is you pull at that strand, and then there's another strand, and there's another strand, and these are the moments.
And they're all interlocking systems.
Yes, of course.
So, in Russia, for example, the Russian Orthodox Church is absolutely critical to the mafia state there. And they, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Archbishop Kirill, is into stocks and investments and wealth and corruption. But he brings a constituency to Putin, and a validity and an affirmation to Putin. And in return, Putin gives in to all his demands on the family, on downgrading domestic violence as a crime, and so on and so forth. Whatever the church wants to keep the family unit strong, usually at the expense of women. So everywhere, these are interlocking systems, which very hard to do one without the other.
God, yes. What do you see any hope? What do you think? What I mean, I'm. This is a whale. This is an absolute whale. From the other side of the world. I just.
Well, I think what we can say is, we see hope because women keep on resisting and keep on inventing, and I think there is another sensibility in the world at the minute, which is that the world has been brought into a condition of peril by these masculinist, patriarchal, overwhelming ideologies and economic systems in a sense, everybody knows that we're in danger and where that danger comes from.
Yeah.
What's, I think, the problem is feminism has been marginalized by the political institutions, and democracy has been discredited and in many places destroyed. And how you reinvigorate that resistance so that it becomes not just, effective, but hegemonic. And, the fight is on. We in the United Kingdom have been living with this mad moment of our ex-Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who's widely hated for being a war criminal, for launching the war in Iraq. And yet he gets extraordinary airtime, and he's coming along and saying, what we've got to do is be closer to Donald Trump and deregulate everything. Well, every feminist, indeed every woman, knows actually all of that is terrible.
God.
So the reaction to it in the UK has been rather interesting, because he's not enjoyed universal adoration. People everywhere are saying, oh God, get off the stage. You're yesterday's man. You were wrong.
Oh, that's good. That's encouraging.
It is.
That's very encouraging. I just don't know if it's encouraging enough. I mean, it is so dicey, and it is so right on the edge, with so little time that's where I despair. And then I often tell myself, well, if it is over, I mean, and done with it, and we've lost, then at the very least we can say this was a bonny way to go. This was a I mean,
and it's not over yet.
No, and it's not over yet, precisely.
And as we say in the book, in the words of Gary Young, there is oil on the floor. We're just waiting for the spark.
Yes,
and,
yes.
And one never knows how that spark will happen.
No, one doesn't. It's true.
And what's important is that there are feminist movements around the world who are existing in the harshest of conditions. I mean, if you take somewhere like Russia, they, for example, to show their solidarity with people of Ukraine, because they can no longer demonstrate against the war, otherwise they'll be put into prison. They wear yellow and blue ribbons in their hair, so that they at least provide solidarity to each other, that they know there are numbers of them in the population.
Infinitely touching.
Yeah, and examples like that all across the countries in which to which we went and which we looked at. And so I think if that knowledge, awareness, understanding of patriarchy and capitalism is there, and there are people resisting it, then I think when the circumstances are right, and it could overturn the current situation. I do believe in people's power. It's just that people's power, if it's not properly directed, could also lead to chaos and anarchy. So
Well, you are fantastic, both of you. I mean, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that we're on the planet at the same time, and I just want to sit at your feet, and absorb more. And we're doing everything we can. We're at the moment we're looking toward the midterms, but we take it on piece by piece by piece, and which is the only thing at this point that we are able to do, because we don't have a majority. But when we do, then there's another set of problems. So it's a minefield, and because none of it has been laid down by us, and to try and shift the weight from what is all their definitions into what might begin to be ours is a humongous task. It's a humongous.
We won't give up.
No, there we go. We won't give up. We won't give up. Thank you so much, Beatrix, and thank you, Raha, for being with us and for your wisdom today. And we'll get you back on the program in the fall, and have another look at things, if you don't mind.
Lovely.
And before you go, Robin, I just wanted to say that I never knew I'd be talking to you, and I wrote the 10-year history of Philia, which is a women's conference which attracts the largest number of women grassroots conference in Europe. And the epigraph to that book is a quotation from Demon Lover about the genius of feminist thought being one of an activism of being connected, of
Interconnected.
connectivity.
Yes.
And it's so represented what philia does, and it was such a perfect quote. So that forms the epigraph to the philia book. I thought you might like to know that before we go.
I'm so grateful. I'm very touched and extremely grateful. And I want to remain in touch with you. So our people will be in touch. So I know where you are and how to write to you. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We have to take another short break here, but I'll return in just a moment with an important fighting word. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Ozymandias. Now that's a fighting word. It's the newest low in atrocious taste. Beyond fighting word. Not since enslaved carpenters, masons, and laborers first built the White House, constructing the house of the people, has the south lawn of the White House grounds been so mortified. For weeks, a construction crew has been assembling an octagon there, with 8 sides and a chain-link enclosure, shaped like a giant looming claw. This is the UFC cage, positioned for the Ultimate Fighting Championship world premiere. UFC stands for Mixed Martial Arts Organization, and this fighter's cage rises in front of the portico of the White House, with absolutely no shame. Cages were initially introduced to prevent fighters from falling out of bounds or slipping through ropes during intense grappling and strangling exchanges. Then, in the 1990s, early no-holds cage fighting faced massive political backlash and bans. Today, the sport is finally somewhat regulated under the unified rules of mixed martial arts, featuring boxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing, wrestling, karate, as well as Brazilian jiu-jitsu and judo. These are no-holds-barred exchanges. And this was Donald Trump's 80th birthday party. You know, I try to laugh, but the sheer poison in every aspect of this spectacle makes even laughter impossible. There's no bottom to this floor, and my nausea overwhelms me. There's only the fragile hope that the elements themselves may have something to say about this travesty, since heavy rainstorms, complete with lightning bolts, are threatened for this outdoor event. And after all, we got lucky before, when D.C. District Judge Christopher Cooper ruled that Trump's name had to be totally erased from the Kennedy Center's marble frontage and everywhere else at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. So down it came, with hundreds of good citizens cheering the erasure on. The eradication of Trump's so-called legacy listing was brought about by Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, Democrat of Ohio, and an ex officio member of the board of the Kennedy Center. Attending a meeting last year after Trump's election, she protested Trump's desire to inflict his name above Kennedy's, which is a memorial. But the rest of Trump's personally hand-picked board muted her voice in the conference call meeting so that she couldn't be heard. This African-American congresswoman has done us all a great service in particular the artists who made the Kennedy Center such a brilliant place to begin with. Thank you, Representative Beatty. Thank you. This is the beginning of self-aggrandizing Trump names coming down from buildings and parks all over the place, littering floors and grounds like the garbage they are. And speaking of garbage, let's pause for a second to acknowledge the memo of misunderstanding that Trump triumphantly brought out of his excursion of negotiations with Iran. He is proclaiming that the U.S. got everything that he wanted. Iran is also claiming the same thing, everything they wanted. Nobody, including the U.S. Senate and the American public, was consulted, so no one has any idea what is even in the document, because nobody's seen it. So they each have different versions of what was said that they've signed, although no one knows what that version is. Isn't that special? Well, at least we have the nicks. And finally, I find the laughter. It's dark laughter. It's bitter. It's in a poem, of course. A poem by Percy Shelley, a famous sonnet, about just how fragile monuments and legacies are. It's called Ozymandias. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. And that's our show for this week. We're on hiatus until the fall, so be sure and look for us then. You can follow me on social media at The Robin Morgan. You can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, and you can find my new novel, Parallax, and my just-out new book of poems, Harvesting Darkness, wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer, as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer for this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on Women's Media Center Live.